morning, everyone. Today I have Dr. Alex Zhavoronkov, the founder and CEO of Insilico Medicine, which is a leading clinical stage biotechnology company developing next generation artificial intelligence and robotics platforms for drug discovery. Under his leadership, Insilico has raised over $400 million in multiple rounds from expert investors. They have opened up R&D centers in 6 countries and have partnered with multiple pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and academic institutions. I believe thus far you have nominated 8 preclinical candidates. Is that right, Alex?
Now it's already 18.
Already 18. Oh, wow.
Time flies.
Time flies. 18 preclinical candidates, which is really an astounding feat, which for reasons we will touch upon later. Alex is also the founder of Deep Longevity, a spinoff of Insilico Medicine, which develops a broad range of artificial intelligence-based biomarkers of aging and longevity, servicing healthcare providers and our life insurance industry. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned about your passion for aging research and longevity medicine, and I actually read your book, The Ageless Generation, How Advances in Biomedicine Will Transform the Global Economy. I think, Alex, it was published in 2013, so I'm reading it 10 years later. I found it eerily prescient and relevant today. You are clearly a very thoughtful and passionate scientist with a remarkable understanding of what plagues healthcare across industrialized nations. You have a rich and nuanced understanding of the context of your own work, but what was even more sort of manifestly obvious to me was your deep love of humanity and your fierce desire to mitigate human suffering and see our human project ultimately succeed. So it's clear that you've taken great care to consider what constitutes not only a long life, but a life that is productive and sincere and concordant with one's own values. So thank you, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Tauber. Very happy to be with you today and very happy to be on your podcast.
Thank you. Please call me Carissa.
Thank you.
So tell me, Alex, how did you get involved in aging research? Your background is in computer science, I believe. Take me back to when you were a student. What interested you? What piqued your curiosity?
So sure, I was always interested in aging all my life since the very early childhood. Since the very early childhood, I thought that aging is a very unfair process because whatever you do in life, however hard you try, you would eventually lose everything. And that includes the wealth, health, and all your friends and loved ones. And unless you convince yourself that there is something better out there after life, it's very difficult to operate on the premise that everything is going to be lost. So I decided to go into information technology first, because at that time I was not born in the US. I was born in Latvia, and during the time when the science technology collapsed in that region. So I decided to migrate to Canada and go into information technology first, because it was just easier. Going into medical school would have taken me much more resources, and at that time it was not feasible. So I went into semiconductors. Had a pretty successful career in semiconductors. Those are the same semiconductors that are powering deep neural networks today, GPUs, and made enough money to finally sustain myself for some time, and decided to go into biotech. So did my grad work at Johns Hopkins, then did my grad work at other institutions and managed a lab. Then in 2014 started Insilico. Before that, I actually looked at many projects in aging and longevity, and participated and helped organize multiple conferences, realized that it's a hugely multidisciplinary field. So as a matter of fact, many people who claim to be working in aging are usually working in demographic research, in social and behavioral sciences. And many people are just trying to kind of cater to the elderly to make their life a little bit better. So in natural sciences, there are multiple fields where people who may be contributing to aging research and longevity significantly do not call themselves aging researchers. And during that time, in early, I think in 2007, 2008, I decided to build a project called the International Aging Research Portfolio, where we started looking at government grants and how they're spent in science, and where do those grants go in terms of classification. So published a few papers on that, and created a database that linked grants, publications, patents, clinical trials, omics repositories, chemistry repositories. So trying to see how the governments worldwide spend their money and how those funds become different fruits of research. And then we used machine learning algorithms to classify those projects. And that's where Insilico began. So originally it began as a nonprofit project. And then 2013, 2014, when deep learning became very powerful and finally started outperforming humans in image recognition, text recognition, I decided to turn most of my initiatives into a commercial project with a purpose to discover drugs, preferably with dual purpose, going after aging and disease at the same time. And if you like, I can also visualize it a little bit to explain how it works. But in general, deep neural networks allow you to recognize very minute patterns in very large amounts of data, and can be trained to generate synthetic biological data or synthetic any data with the desired generation conditions. And age is one universal feature that actually everybody has. So every living and non-living object, at least in Newtonian physics universe, has age. And it is possible to train deep neural networks to predict this feature, utilizing massive amounts of biological or any kind of other data that changes in time. So for example, it's possible to take a snapshot of somebody's face and deep neural networks would predict age very accurately. You can do the same feat on blood tests, on MRI, on CT scans, on genetic, epigenetic, gene expression data, many protein expression data, many data types can be used to build what we call aging clocks using AI. And our company was one of the first to, and the first organizations globally to start building those predictors. And as it turned out, if you train deep neural networks on multiple previously disconnected data types, and you give those deep neural networks enough data, they learn fundamental biology. And you can do that also across species. And we started utilizing that approach to identify promising protein targets that are implicated in aging, but also in disease. Mm-hmm. So you train neural networks on age and then retrain them on diseases and see which features are most important for predicting age and disease at the same time. And then put them into biological pathways and look at the relevance and annotation of each target, see how druggable it is, etc. So we turned this into a commercial software project. Now it's called Panda Omics. Hundreds of organizations globally are using this platform for target discovery. Target discovery and disease modeling is a pretty kind of niche field. Many academics do that, but they usually follow one or two or three philosophies that they like to identify the mechanism of disease. What we've built is a tool that incorporates more than 60 target discovery philosophies and helps pharmaceutical companies predominantly identify protein targets, but it can also be used for aging research. Mm. And then we also develop tools that allow you to do to design small molecules so small molecule chemistry, that allows you to specifically target, inhibit those proteins that you identified using proteomics. And we call this tool called Chemistry 42. It generates molecules with the desired properties, so you don't need to look for a needle in a haystack, and you can generate perfect needles. And then in 2019, we actually decided to use the software to go after our own programs and demonstrate that it is possible to convert kind of money into drugs very quickly using AI. And that's where we nominated 18 preclinical candidates already. 6 programs that we have are in human clinical trials, and 2 are in phase 2 human clinical trials in both in the US and in China. And some of those targets that we go after, they have those properties of being a target that is likely implicated in a disease, but also has been implicated in in one or several what we call hallmarks of aging. So in this case, aging research is a bonus. Nobody is going to give you $2.5 billion to develop a therapeutic for aging with only 1% probability of success. So it's very important to first go after diseases and then kind of repurpose into aging, but having aging research in mind from the very beginning. So that's how I got into aging. That's what we do in aging. One of the highlights of what I do is I founded and now I co-chair a conference called Aging Research and Drug Discovery in Copenhagen. It became the world's largest meeting in biotechnology in aging research. And it's a 5-day event. A lot of people travel there from all over the world. We have very limited capacity because of the epic grand hall of the University of Copenhagen that they provide for this event. But about 6,000 to 7,000 people dial in online as well. And it's kind of Oscars for longevity. So that's why I always try to invite people to this event, either virtually or go on site, because I think that aging research is the most important area of human development right now, because you can convert money into many things, but you cannot convert money into life yet. And life is the most important asset you've got, healthy life. So that's what we're trying to do. And I think it's a pretty big goal for anybody to set to, try to go and fight aging. But in the meantime, you contribute to the development of drugs that go after multiple diseases.
Yeah. I think, Alex, I remember from medical school that what the statistic that was thrown out to us, and that was only 5 years ago, is it takes 10 years and $2 billion to bring a new drug to the market. So for people who don't understand just how inefficient and prohibitively expensive it can be to develop new medication, it helps contextualize a lot of your work, knowing that. So I want people to listening to have a real appreciation for how your process has revolutionized drug development.
So sure, I would actually like to illustrate it with one slide for those people who are also watching this, and I'll try to narrate as much as possible for those who are not. I'll need screen sharing privileges to do that. And one thing I've learned by attending many conferences and also organizing my own was that many basic researchers and actually many medical doctors and some of the expert drug hunters do not know how long it takes and how much effort it takes to develop a drug. And I still cannot share.
Oh.
So if you go to participants, and it says host disabled participant screen sharing. That might be okay. I can just talk through it if you like, but currently it's just not available.
I'm trying to. It says that you can share your screen now. I'm not sure.
No, it doesn't allow me to. It says host disabled participant sharing. But anyway, if you like, we can cut it out, or if you like, we can do this again.
Maybe would it help to make you the host?
Sure, that would probably be a very good idea.
That way you can share. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So I'll share my screen. And the key message from what I'm going to tell you today is that in the pharmaceutical industry and in practical medicine, nothing is more important than clinical trials and drugs that go through clinical trials and demonstrate efficacy. So nowadays, everybody is talking about AI, right? There is a huge hope for AI, and AI is already outperforming humans in many tasks. And some of the very advanced tasks like legal support and even consulting could be taken over by some of those models. However, in drug discovery and in medicine, you would not be able to see those advances very quickly because you need to validate the output of those generative models and validate in mice, so in animals, validate in other experimental models, and then validate in humans and go and demonstrate that the drug is safe, it's effective, and then it's safe and effective. So regardless of what technology you use, imagine that you are using some crystal ball that you are talking to and asking to generate specific molecules for a specific target. So regardless of how you do it, the most important thing is to pass human clinical trials. And if you haven't done that, you actually haven't done anything, in my opinion. And that's why I do not really consider ourselves a successful company yet, because we have not completed a phase 3 human clinical trial using our models. So, and using our drugs. So here you can see on the screen a modified version of a very old slide, a very old figure coming from a very important paper by Stephen Paul. At that time, he was at Eli Lilly in Nature Reviews Drug Discovery, How to Improve R&D Productivity, the Pharmaceutical Industry's Grand Challenge. And in his paper in 2010, he showed the different stages of drug discovery and development. So target to hit, hit to lead, lead optimization, preclinical development, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, submission to launch. And for each stage, he averaged the probability of success. So here you've got the first line is probability of success, number of time it takes at each stage, and the amount of money it takes at each stage in millions of dollars. And those were 2010 money. So in his estimates, the average cost of developing a drug, discovering and developing a drug from the stage where you already know the target, you know the protein that is implicated in a disease, it's about 1.8 billion. Since then, this cost has almost doubled. So we're talking about 2.6 to $6.1 billion, depending on different academic techniques to estimate those costs, right? Because if you just take the amount of money that the pharmaceutical companies, big pharma companies spend on R&D, and divided by the number of molecules that they get approved every year, it's actually closer to $6 billion, which is a huge number.
Wow.
So, but there are many other techniques to evaluate that. And on average, it takes about 12 years to discover a drug for a known target. And I'll give you an example. For example, I would say the most popular target in the world today is GLP-1. Right, we're talking about glucagon receptor, and everybody is going after this particular target. Some companies are also looking to do dual targeting, so GLP-1, GIP, and some other targets to maximize the effectiveness and also minimize the side effects like muscle wasting. But this target was discovered in 1980s. we actually know that some large pharmaceutical companies like Novo Nordisk started the discovery programs for this drug with an antibody in early 2000s. So it took 20 years to get this drug to where it is, to get this target to where it is today. Of course, there were several interim attempts and drugs that were placed on the market. But so far, there is no small molecule drug that hits GLP-1 and has been approved, right? And works really well. So several companies are racing to do that. So we are talking about the span of 20 years, 25 years to get those drugs that target chronic diseases. And we're talking about very substantial amount of money. So you can see that the major failures transpire around phase 2 human clinical trials. So in phase 1, we test safety, and here about half of the drugs fail. And in phase 2, we test safety and efficacy, and about 70% of the drugs fail, right? So huge number. And then we know that if phase 2 was successfully passed, the probability of passing phase 3 is actually pretty high. So it's about 70% to 30% fallout. But what people are not talking about is why phase 2s fail. And very often that is because the target choice, so the target that was selected for this indication, was not perfect. It's either the wrong target or you just didn't select the right patients. And we're again talking about 12-year horizons. So I'll just add one more piece to this puzzle. And we're talking about disease hypothesis and target discovery. So we formulate the hypothesis behind the disease. For example, for Alzheimer's, we still don't know what's driving it and how to cure it. For many other diseases, we still don't know. Even for something, as primitive as muscle wasting, right? So we know that there is sarcopenia, people waste muscle over time. We don't know how to fight it effectively at this point in time, even though there is a huge bodybuilding community. People actually want it more than just losing fat. So that would be a really nice problem to solve. And of course, for aging, we still don't know if there is any target that will work in humans. So the probability of success discovering a novel target and taking it to the level where it's validated enough to start a preclinical program that would be taken by a biotechnology company, it's actually 1 to 5%. So 95 to 99% failure rates. Most of the time, this particular step is performed in academia. Even if you look at this GLP-1, right, it's still the academic institutions. That was Janssen from University of Copenhagen, who discovered GLP-1, and a few other colleagues. And the same story is true for many other cancer targets, KRAS, c-MYC, EGFR. Many of those targets, they were discovered by academics after years of tremendous medical and biomedical research. And most of the targets that they've tried failed. So I basically conservatively estimate 1 to 10 years for discovery of the target, and it's billions of dollars. NIH spends over $34 billion annually on biomedical research, and much of that is going into research that may yield targets. So we see that this massive amount of funding is not resulting in effective targets that we should have an abundance of. And so far with AI, we've managed to shorten the cycle of disease hypothesis and target discovery process, and also identification of molecules that hit those targets. And then if you have a very streamlined process for preclinical development, where you test those drugs, both the target and a small molecule combination in animals and disease models, you can actually now also go pretty quickly into human clinical trials. And what we have done so far, many times over, so we've nominated preclinical candidates. Preclinical candidates is basically somewhere maybe a notch before phase one, and you just complete GLP talks, so toxicity studies, additional toxicity studies, and you can start a human clinical trial. So we've done that 18 times. We have two cases where we went into phase two. So actually completing phase one, which is really cool. But still, I cannot claim victory because we are in phase two. And the phase two, as you know, that's where the rubber meets the road. So you've done all this hard work. You actually spend a lot of money, and you still may fail. And we try to minimize this probability by going after targets that may be implicated in more than one disease, that are master regulators. So if the target works in many, many diseases, you should expect it to be more successful in phase two than the target that is going after a specific disease that is addressing many patients in the population. What I want to show you also is that in one case we've managed to complete even phase 0 and phase 1 study, right? So we also were so worried that the target choice was wrong and the target may be toxic. We actually did a small 8 healthy volunteer study in Australia to ensure that we can move forward. And usually you complete dozens of experiments at the in vitro level, testing in cells, then multiple in vivo studies in animals, mouse, dog, hamster, monkey, and only then you go into humans. So we have done that, and AI could help us a lot. So my average time to go from 0 to preclinical candidate, so basically into IND-enabling studies, is now approximately just over a year. And this particular case where we went to preclinical candidate with an anti-fibrotic drug took us approximately $2.73 million. So dramatically reducing the cost that you usually incur. And one of the reasons why we managed to do that is actually, it's not only AI, it's also the reliance on many contract research organizations, predominantly in Asia, and also many of them are in China. That's why I'm a little bit frustrated nowadays that, due to geopolitics, we might even lose the opportunity to contract some of those contract research organizations, right? And that's why we should all probably fight for peace and prosperity rather than, at least in this area, because cancer patients would benefit, or Alzheimer's patients will benefit everywhere if this process is streamlined. But once you go into this area, so lead optimization and preclinical development, you better have multiple labs on standby with a lot of infrastructure that allow you to do many studies in parallel. Otherwise, you're going to just get stuck in this area. And in several diseases, we've seen that ourselves, right? So you actually need to ensure that the assays are available. And this phase 2 that I was talking about, it's one of the most famous, I guess, programs on the planet right now because it was on the cover of Financial Times. It comes out of generative artificial intelligence. I also have massive robotics facilities that support some of those projects. And one other important note about some of those programs that we're running is that we are trying to find common targets in aging and disease. So many proteins that are responsible for the general decline in many of your system's functions are also implicated in disease, at least at the early stages, and sometimes actually they are driving the disease in the later stage as well, from what we see. So we thought, okay, we're not going to try and lobby for classifying aging as a disease. We're going to piggyback on some of the diseases that have targets that are also implicated in aging. And we published a research study 2022, actually did this study in 2021, and showed that using our tool that I've talked about on the omics that allows you to very rapidly prioritize specific genes and proteins in the context of a disease by going after massive data sets, predominantly from a public domain. And here we looked at many age-related diseases and non-age-related diseases, identified a very substantial number of protein targets that could be classified as targets and annotated, and used our system to annotate those proteins into druggable classes, looked at druggability filters, so how druggable they are, developmental level, tissue specificity, safety, novelty, of course, and created this kind of target wheel by classifying those targets into specific areas of aging research. So they are called hallmarks of aging. It's one of the biggest breakthroughs that was published over the past 10 years, now past 11 years, by the aging community. It's a big consortium that works on analyzing what processes drive aging, and they're called hallmarks. And in that particular iteration of this hallmarks paper, we have cellular senescence, dysregulate nutrient signaling, extracellular matrix stiffness, genomic instability, epigenetic shift, retrotransposition, impaired proteostasis, inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, stem cell exhaustion, telomere attrition, and altered intracellular communications. So all of those processes work in unison and drive aging. But some of those processes individually may be more important than the others in specific diseases. For example, some targets that are driving cellular senescence may also be implicated in cancer and could be really amazing anti-cancer drugs. As a matter of fact, most of the senolytics, so to speak, the drugs that kill senescent cells, are cancer drugs. And one of the targets here that you can see, KAT6A, with high level of, moderate level of novelty and medium level of druggability, was one of the targets that we were developing for cancer, but also for a few other diseases. And we just sold this program to a company called Menarini for the deal with total value of over $500 million. So you can actually see that they are commercially valuable, and people are embracing the idea that some of those targets are implicated in cancer, even though they might have dual purpose, at least in my opinion here from this paper. And so that's why I highly recommend everybody to read this paper. And here is kind of a bigger slide of this figure. And one of the targets that we currently have in phase 2 is called TNIC. It scored in 6 hallmarks of aging, which was really cool, right? We purposed it towards fibrosis and then specifically into idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. But since it's implicated in so many aspects of aging, it may work somewhere else. So that's kind of our hypothesis. As a matter of fact, I'll show you maybe one more slide. So this paper was published by the University of Copenhagen by the wonderful led by the PI Dr. Likasilo, who is one of the world authorities on muscle wasting and metabolism. In that paper, published very recently, they demonstrated that this same target allows mice that lack this gene live on high-fat, high-sugar diet and not gain significant amount of fat, but and also not lose muscle. So I'll just show you the difference, right? So this is a TNIC knockout mouse. This is wild-type mouse. Both had the same diet, males, females, and you can see that both females and males clearly did not gain as much fat as those puffy ones. And you can see the muscle through their skin, right? So it's actually really cool, and we do expect this target to be implicated in many other diseases. So that's kind of the example I wanted to show. But we purposed it towards fibrosis, and we think that fibrosis is one of the key drivers of aging, and also aging drives fibrotic dysregulation. So that's why we decided to focus on the STENIC target as our primary target. But we also have many other targets that we're taking forward. So, for example, TNIC is the one I was talking about. This is a slightly older slide. So now we have many more preclinical candidates. USP1 was a target, synthetic lethality target that was licensed to a company called Exelixis for $80 million upfront. It also shows you that those drugs are of ultra high quality when it comes out of generative, because you can, instead of looking for a molecule as a needle in a haystack, you can generate perfect needles with the desired properties and synthesize and test. So we started doing that at scale. Sometimes you can add additional properties into the molecule to go after a disease with a target that might be toxic in other diseases. So, for example, PHD12, it's HIF1 alpha target, very popular for anemia and chronic kidney disease. We know that the target is active, so it works in multiple biological processes. And what we decided to do is we decided to make a gut-restricted molecule that does not get into the blood but works in the gut using AI, right? So just by manipulating several properties of the molecule. And we took it for inflammatory bowel disease, right? So there you can have higher dosing and still have pretty high safety because the molecule doesn't get into the blood. And we're also targeting epithelial integrity, so mucosal and epithelial barrier repair function. So instead of just being anti-inflammatory, you actually help the body repair itself. So this target, HIF1 alpha, PHD12, is very popular in aging research as well. So that's kind of our modus operandi. But some are very clearly implicated in cancer and not implicated in aging. We do some of those projects for as commercial opportunities, or just to test whether AI works very well in those targets or not. So that's what I wanted to show. So this is real. We can now claim that AI tangibly accelerates multiple processes of drug discovery and development. And in the field of medicine, we should expect our toolkit, not your toolkit as doctors, to dramatically expand over the course of the next 15, 20 years, because we should see acceleration in the number of drugs that are being approved by the FDA, and many of those drugs are being minted utilizing AI.
Thanks, Alex. That was a wonderful introduction to your work, and it's incredibly impressive. I'm conscious of your time. Something I wanted to ask you before we end is, in your book, you sort of talked about how you identified the major catalysts for social change and tectonic shifts and paradigm shifts in scientific revolutions. And at the time of the writing, you cited, war, unfortunately, being something that we're very familiar with in this country. But then secondarily, you said also a major pandemic could conceivably radically change how we approach aging and longevity medicine. And this was written in 2013, and now I'm reading it in 2024. How do you think the COVID pandemic has renewed interest in this topic, if at all?
So sure. Well, I think that COVID pandemic it's kind of like childbirth. It's painful. It's sometimes uncomfortable, but people forget about it and do it again. And we were just naturally predisposed to forgetting very dramatic events in our life, right? Or death in the family. People are very adaptable, and the natural reaction to any dramatic event is to shut off that particular event from memory. So right now, people are trying to forget COVID. right? So in some countries where we operate, you're not allowed to talk about it publicly at scale, right? Because people were sitting in quarantines for 2 years and you couldn't travel into some of those countries. And now it's kind of politically incorrect to talk about those policies made back then, and even progress some of the drugs, right? Because nowadays we kind of went from ultra alert to very low level of interest in the topic. You probably remember every scientist out there published a paper on COVID in 2021, 2022. Citation ratings have skyrocketed. But at the same time, and journals started accepting papers at very fast pace. But what you see right now is that people, if you say COVID, oh, okay, well, this topic, let's just not go after it, etc. I have a COVID program as well, so 3C-like protease, so I can see it from the trenches, right? So we invested quite a bit of money to develop a drug that selectively goes after C3-like protease. It's a protein target implicated in COVID replication. And we took it through phase 1 clinical study already, right? But then to invest more in this, for example, to go into phase 2, you need a lot of money, right? And at that time, your investors, your board members, and also just the general investment community would not welcome this development, right? So you need to pause and look for a partner. So we see that the rebounds from COVID pandemic is pretty dramatic. People just don't want to talk about that. We definitely learned something from this dramatic event. One thing is that we don't have the tools to rapidly develop drugs. So the only company, and I have to acknowledge that, that managed to do extremely well during COVID, mobilize the resources and properly develop drugs and vaccines was Pfizer. So they developed both the drug and the vaccine. So Albert Bourla was a hero at that time, and he is paying for that dearly right now, because in 2021, 2022, they managed to partner with BioNTech and get the vaccines on the market. That is a heroic event because it was there were so many impediments, and so many other companies failed. And then they found an already existing molecule that they identified decades ago, and resurrected that molecule, modified it, combined it with another molecule, put it on the market as Paxlovid, and went through clinical studies. So that's also a heroic event. They did it on unprecedented speed. Took them 2.5 years, close to 3 years, basically. You can say 2.5 to get a drug approved. And I think that's one of the fastest approvals in human history, in human recent history. And then they got a lot of revenue from the drug, but now people just completely abandoned this field, and Pfizer is dearly paying for it because now they have to pivot into other disease areas. And you can see that they have layoffs, they have restructuring. I'm interviewing people from Pfizer's AI teams from time to time, and there are more resumes than you can imagine. And at the same time, the company is not exactly super collaborative. I don't regard them as a driver of innovation. They just managed to do extremely well during COVID. But everybody else, except for Pfizer, could not really reach that point, right? So they like GSK. Look at GSK. They were one of the largest vaccine providers in the world before COVID, one of the largest antiviral makers, and no vaccine, no drug, right? And many, many others. So we see that there is a huge gap. And if another pandemic strikes, imagine airborne HIV or something much worse than that, that kills quickly, right? But incubates for a very long time. We probably wouldn't be able to react to it as quickly as we want to. And also geopolitics that we see today are making it even worse. Yeah. Because now people want to decouple biotech, and you should never decouple biotech. That should also always be the last straw, keeping the companies, the countries and the companies together. ensuring the investment flow, information flow. And I think it's a crime on the politicians' part to actually restrict international collaboration in biotech, especially when it comes to infectious diseases, because the next pandemic could be our last. And I think that, aging aside, cancer aside, Alzheimer's aside, all the rare diseases aside, those kind of diseases that could eliminate our human race, we should ensure that we collaborate and we improve communication, not the other way around. And right now you see some politicians, and actually I'm sorry for singling it out, in the US as well,
no, absolutely.
specifically, is just if they want to get elected, if they want a Twitter buzz around them, if they want the media attention, and also the electorate support for people who are intrinsically against everybody, but now specifically against China.
Yeah.
They are making additional roadblocks in the infrastructure and the specific flows of ideas, capital, and collaborations that may kill humanity. And that's my problem, right? So actually, I see a lot of that happening, not to us, but to other companies. And I think it's a crime against humanity, because the fundamental human right is the right to live. And next pandemic could be our last. I actually think that nowadays the world is also full of bad agents outside the US mostly. And many of them have the capacity to go after those diseases and design those diseases to have specific properties. And now they can also talk to ChatGPT and other tools and get the information and instruction manuals they need to create those dramatic events for us. So I think that we need to be extremely vigilant. And the last straw that would be broken should be biotech. So everything else we can decouple, but biotech is something that keeps us alive and gives us a chance to live longer and happier life. So that's why I think that what we see today, those geopolitical tensions, they should not touch biotech, but we probably will see that they will. And we cannot do anything about it. So what we've learned from COVID, we haven't learned anything.
Yeah, no, I'm very frustrated by that. I can only imagine what it takes for you to sustain your work across multiple countries and keep it above the fray and whims and vicissitudes of geopolitics. So I have a great appreciation for that.
Well, let's hope that people are not that crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we never know, right? So let's see end of this year, right? What's going to happen?
So
let's hope people prioritize the economy and social development around the world over their political agendas.
Absolutely. So very quickly, Alex, what are you hoping to accomplish by the time when you retire at the age of 150?
So, my problem right now is that I became a realist when it comes to aging research and technology development in general. We're likely to see phenomenal output out of generative AI and other associated technologies. We're going to see humanoids next 5 years helping us out, right? So that's why, people previously were pressed to reproduce and form families because they wanted to get some support when they're older. Right now, you should be very, very safe about this because you're going to have multiple humanoids supporting you, and they are going to provide the unconditional love we need to make our retirement very comfortable. But in one area, specifically drug discovery and development, and also aging, practical applied aging research, I'm very frustrated and practical because now I am in this field. When I wrote the book, The Ageless Generation, I didn't have Insilico, right? And I actually had rosy glasses, thinking that those exponential advances are going to affect drug discovery, and I see that it's not that dramatic, right? Yeah. So we see that in individual steps of drug discovery and development, we can see dramatic acceleration, right? So I can now make a molecule with the desired properties for a moderately druggable target within a couple weeks, right? And instead of spending years, and the probability of success with those molecules is high. But then you realize that if I want to test this molecule in an aging study, and I want to get to humans, it's mission impossible, right? You actually have to put it in a disease. Otherwise, nobody's going to give you the money to do this. I became much more frustrated when it comes to projecting the future of kind of traditional biotechnology applied to aging research. So I think we need to have a paradigm shift and look at maybe regenerative medicine a little closer, right? And figuring out how to replace parts rather than make them last longer. So I see my kind of later career being focused on that, and also building more dramatic biotechnology infrastructure that is fully integrated. So I built the first robotics lab that allows you to automatically identify targets and model diseases without human intervention and very quickly validate. So I've done that, big check mark. So now I know how to do this. I want to expand that far beyond traditional drug discovery paradigm. I think that the integration of AI, robotics, and our knowledge of biotechnology and medicine will allow us to vertically integrate biotechnology. So think about not huge campuses with distributed companies, but vertical skyscrapers dedicated to specific diseases, and maybe also integrating medicine and biotechnology in one. So I think that going beyond just drug discovery and then letting clinicians use the tools and the fruits of your research, I think we need to break through this paradigm and integrate medicine and drug discovery. That's why I'm very hopeful that within the next couple of years, I'll be able to launch hospital-side robotics myself for target discovery. We are likely to launch the servers that could go directly into the hospital and allow you to identify targets without the need to share the data outside the hospital, and also automatically pre-write the papers even, right? So that would be really, really cool tool for the physicians. But I think that we can go beyond that. And I see my next 30, 40 years being spent on that. So integrating biotechnology with medicine and going vertical integration 100%. So at Insilico and beyond.
Yeah. And I'm quite envious. You have a foot in both the East and the West, which hold very different philosophies towards pathophysiology and disease and human health and homeostasis. So I think that you have ready access to fertile ground for future exploration. So I'm quite envious of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And please come to our ARDD conference, and would love to see you there as well.
When is
that? Is 26th of August, to 30th of August.
Okay.
In Copenhagen. It's an epic time to be there because it's wonderful end of the summer, beginning of the autumn. Beautiful weather, beautiful facility, and over 120 speakers focused specifically on different types of aging research. Also, about 40 startups.
Wow.
So, and many pharma companies. Very credible event.
Wow. Well, I'll certainly try. I will try. Thank you so much, Alex. This was incredibly instructive and inspiring, and a really tremendous work.
Thank you, Carissa. Hope to collaborate with your audience, and yes. Please do, at least if you are not contributing to aging research actively, at least try to lobby for more biomedical research collaborations internationally, so we don't get into the situation where US decouples from China and the next pandemic hits.
Yeah.
we're going to be in deep trouble.
I certainly will try. That is a pet project of mine too. So thank you really so much for your time today. I know you're very busy. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you. Thanks so
Thank
much.